You have happy employees, you have happy customers, you have happy employees and happy customers, you grow.
Ayo, welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number 1984. No, just kidding. It's episode 84, and today's guest is Tiffani Bova. She is the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce and the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of Growth IQ. She has been featured in every major publication east, west, north, and south of the Mississippi. And she also hosts the amazing podcast What's Next with Tiffani Bova, where she interviews some of the brightest minds you'll ever hear from, including Seth Godin, Arianna Huffington, and Guy Kawasaki. Before her time at Salesforce, she was VP at Gartner for 10 years. And today we're diving into growth, maybe some more growth, and also growth. So let's grow with Tiffani Bova. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with the woman who puts growth in wild business growth, Tiffani Bova. How you doing today, Tiffani?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I feel like this is such a long time coming because growth is literally in the podcast name. And it seems like everything you do across your career goes back to growth. And you're living, breathing, walking, running, skydiving example of it. So before we get into the sort of growth and innovation worlds, I do want to ask you about Hawaii because I can't resist.
All right. That's always a good topic.
Yeah. So I know you grew up in Hawaii. When you think back, what is your fondest memory from your upbringing there?
Oh, there's no way I could pick one. There's no other way to say it, but growing up, being born and raised in Hawaii did not suck. It would be, you want to study how Earth is formed. Great. Let's get on an airplane and fly to the Big Island and watch the volcano erupting live. You want to learn how, the ocean plays such an important part in us as humans. Great, let's just after class, get in the car and drive down to the beach and go study the reef. You want to go and study, what forests look like or rainforests look like. Great, let's get on a plane, go to Kauai, check that out. It was amazing from just a pure learning experience, but also culturally, it's the melting pot in the Pacific Rim. So, I was the only Caucasian kid growing up in sort of preschool and kindergarten. It was Japanese and Chinese and Tongan and Samoan and Hawaiian and Thai and Vietnamese and Korean and and me, right? And so so culturally, the food was fantastic. The people was fantastic. You got Chinese New Year, American New Year. You got, the pomp and circumstance of the Hawaiian culture. There's no way I could pick one thing. And I didn't leave full time till I was 30. So, I spent a good portion of my life there.
I don't blame you. And when you were describing how all the cool and amazing and, basically record-breaking things nearby, I was thinking back to my upbringing in Cleveland, and it was basically the same thing.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Yeah, except minus the snow. Perfect.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
We
had a guy who would literally fly in snow.
Oh my God.
Because we didn't get snow, and the first time, the Big Island would get snow every once in a while, because we have the tallest peak in the world, actually, from the bottom of the ocean to the top of Haleakala is taller than Mount Everest, but from the above water to the top, Everest is taller, but from the bottom of the ocean to the top, we are higher. So we have also, kind of seasonality, but not the way you would have it in Cleveland.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've always thought of Cleveland and Hawaii as basically the same thing. So thank you for confirming
You're
that.
welcome. You're welcome.
But you have so many amazing memories there. You did mention that around the time you were 30, you moved elsewhere in the US. So what made you come to the contiguous United States in the first place? And that is just an excuse to use the word contiguous.
Yeah, we say mainland, but I like yours.
Oh, that works
I'll pick.
too.
Yep. And so we say going to the mainland. It had a lot to do with work, really, quite honestly. I mean, the biggest industry in Hawaii is government because of the military. We have all branches of military on Oahu. So we have, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force. We have Pearl Harbor, obviously. And so
Hmm.
that's number one is government because of military. And then underneath that would be tourism. So if you're going to work in the hotel, restaurant, airline industry, if you will. And then, if you want to, Hawaii is not inexpensive to live in. It's not as expensive as New York and California, I would say, but it's expensive. And you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, something like that. And so I said, and none of those threes are really interest me. So I started liking sort of sales and marketing and kind of found accidentally my way into selling technology early in my 20s, sort of middle 20s, and work just brought me back and forth to California. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I'm going to move part-time, and then I'm going to move full-time. And then I always got Hawaii in my territory from a selling perspective. So I'd go home every quarter. And, through my 30s, I still got to go home a lot. And then, in my career at Gartner, I could write anywhere. So I would go home a week or two out of the quarters and I would write there. So, I tried it. I still have my home there. My mom's still there. So, I like to say Hawaii is my home and Los Angeles is my home airport. That's how I make myself, feel better about the day.
Right. Yeah. Well, I thought you've never traveled in your life, so that's a big surprise. And last thing, I mean, I'm sure I could go on for a full hour about Hawaii, but when you think back to the diverse culture and all the amazing people that you grew up with, and just the amazing elements of nature that were surrounding you, what elements of that upbringing or that childhood have been most helpful for you in your professional career?
Oh, that's an easy answer. So I would say that it helped me be very culturally in tune with where I was in the world because being from Hawaii, it had such a large Asian contingency that when I would travel, let's just say I'd go to Hong Kong or Singapore or Shenzhen or Tokyo or whatever it might be, I felt like I fitted and knew the culture. And also, it made me very aware of very early in my career, like the things that, well, I'm dating myself now, but that women could and could not do at that time in business, like where we sat in the room, who
Mm,
got to speak, who negotiated deals. I mean, 30 years ago, it was very different. And so when I started traveling for business outside the United States, I was always very aware of even some as basic as how you hand your business card to the executive that you meet, and how you greet them, how you say hello, the little isms you may say when you're on stage. So I think it made me very culturally aware of others, and that has served me well as I travel a tremendous amount for my work.
yeah, there's nothing like being thrown into such a unique and amazing culture like that. If you look across your career, there's clearly elements there that you've taken from your upbringing and funneled that into the amazing success you've had. Let's get to growth.
All
And
right.
was yeah, fasten your seatbelt, which is a term that I'm sure you've heard a lot and speak a lot about. But you are the growth and innovation evangelist at Salesforce, and you have the book Growth IQ. Your podcast What's Next covers a lot of elements of growth and what to do next as well. Let's start off with growth and innovation. So in all the research you've done and in all the, I guess, growth activities that you've lived out and played out through your career, what rises to the top as the number one way to grow your business?
I think the backbone to corporate growth is personal growth. So I don't think companies, executives, people can grow in their sort of business life as a leader, as a manager, grow the business from a revenue standpoint without personally growing. And some of that personal growth is uncomfortable because change is hard. Change is hard for an individual human, but if you have your own, if you're an entrepreneur and have your own business, you not only have to motivate yourself to change, but now you have to motivate everybody around you to change. And so getting
Right.
yourself to do it, if you're a small business, right, then 5 people, 10, 50, 100. Imagine if it's 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people that you have to motivate. When you start talking about somebody like a, Ginny Rometty, who's the retiring, CEO for IBM, hundreds of thousands of employees. Like, how do you
Yeah.
even begin to think about, like, I'm going to take a company that's been around for 100 years and completely try to shift the culture from being on premise to cloud and from being hardware to software and from, whatever it might be. Or if you look at some of the new startups, the Ubers or Facebooks or Googles of the world, like, those founders that maintained to be leaders or CEOs of those businesses, you know, you have to, what is that culture? What does it stand for? And that had everything to do with their success and failures you could almost map back to, it's the personal side of it, not always it wasn't like they were, stealing money. They just,
That's not the secret to everything.
it was kind of a rotten culture, right? Which is a people thing, right? So that's why I say that I think that the backbone to corporate growth is personal growth. So, it is all about understanding business, yes, but you have to understand the people side as well.
And so what are the best ways to get in tune and understand the people side? Because that's a whole, I mean, that's an extremely complex world there.
Yes. Well, the first thing I'd say is, if you're a leader or small business owner, you first have to understand yourself. Start there. And, what are your strengths as a leader? And just because you were a really good engineer doesn't mean you're going to be a really good business owner. Or because you're a really good salesperson doesn't mean you're going to be a really good sales leader. Or, because you were a great vice president doesn't mean you're going to be a great CEO. So, you constantly have to be investing in yourself. But I think the first and foremost, sort of, what are your strengths? And then, as a friend of mine who's on Shark Tank Australia, Naomi Simpson, often says, she's a shark, so I figure she knows exactly what she's talking about. She said she calls it her non-strengths. And so it's sort of, what are your strengths and what are your non-strengths? And so understanding what your non-strengths are, as an entrepreneur, and this is her example, like, she's really good on the evangelizing and brand and the selling and the marketing and, sort of getting the excitement around her company and being that person that's out there talking about it. And obviously she had the show, but she's so much more than that. She was Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year for Australia. And,
Wow.
there's 20 million people in Australia. She has 4.5 million of them follow her on LinkedIn. Like, she's, so she knows what she's doing. She also knows her non-strengths. And so she brought in a CEO to do the people process side. It's like that. She goes, managing people is just not my strength. So really good on the business side, and I'm not so good on the people process side. So that's what I mean by understanding your strengths and understanding your non-strengths, and hire those people around you who can pick those things up that are not what you do, and complement your strengths. And then you want to surround yourself also with people who will amplify your strengths, right? The multiplier effect of having people who are really good at something and you're all getting together, and the power of all of you can propel it forward. But I think the very first step goes back to that understanding yourself on kind of what your strengths and non-strengths are. And then how do you create a team that will function well together, where everyone understands their roles and is kind of rowing in the same direction? Because as businesses grow, culture can sometimes get lost along the way, right? If you don't maintain it, you'll look back and go, wow, how did we get here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's such a powerful thing of focusing on your strengths. Obviously, if you spend so much time trying to be well rounded and focus on things that you're so far away from being a strength, then that's just not going to work for you in the long term. When you are looking at yourself, it's kind of a funny question because it seems like it would be intuitive, but I feel like so many people struggle with it. How do you recognize what are the strengths you should focus on and what are the things that you should hire or collaborate with people to help you out on? Because, like, is it, does it take the help of someone else to really point it out for you and be like, hey, you know what, you should just focus on this and we'll cover you on this?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think that this is where people get stuck. They think they have to come up with those answers of what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses all on their own. But this goes back to my comment about personal growth. Like you have to be very vulnerable on this journey. If you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, or leader, like being transparent and vulnerable, not so that you appear like you don't know what you're doing. That's not what I mean. But in the sense of actually asking people questions like, hey, what did you like? Do you like my meetings that I run? How could I make them better?
Mm.
As just an example, right? And so somebody goes, well, I like them, but they're a little long. Like I think they could be a half hour. And you ask a couple people and they all say that. Change the meeting to a half hour. Guess what happens? Everyone goes, wow, he or she asked me what I thought. I thought it should be a half hour. He changed the meeting to a half hour. And lo and behold, they're far more productive and I'm far more engaged. Hey, why do you invite me to meetings? Like it's not my meeting. Why do you invite me to meetings? Well, I do it because it depends, right? This is going back to this sort of transparency and trust and being very vulnerable. Because if someone just goes, oh, well, I think you add a lot of value, but you don't say anything, then you know that that's not the truth, right? But if they go, well, I really want you to participate, but you don't really say very much, then you have to reflect and go, well, why am I not saying anything? And if I'm not saying anything, why am I attending the meeting? Like, so a lot of it comes down to, asking questions about why people have you on teams or invite you to meetings. And same thing, what do they like about having you there? And you will find through that exercise, and you can't sort of like blast it out and do it all in a day and go, okay, I know the answer. Like you kind of have to do it over, let's say like over a month or two. When you get a chance to say, hey, thank you for inviting me to the meeting. I just wondered, why did you invite me? And hear what they say. And all of a sudden you're going to start to find this commonality of, what people really like about having you there, or potentially why it may even just be, well, it's obligatory. Like you don't really add any value, but I figured if I didn't invite you, you'd be mad, right? Kind of a thing. So going back to full honesty here. And
Yeah.
then you can say, okay, now I know regardless of what I think of myself, like what do other people think of me? And what do other people think my strengths and weaknesses are and my non-strengths are? Then you have a real starting point. But if you're just sort of like, oh, I don't think I'm very good at public speaking, so I'm going to go, focus on public speaking. But yet people are like, wow, you inspire me when you speak. Well, you don't even know that unless you ask. So
Right.
I think those kinds of things. But this goes back to, if you're really going to try to be a leader and do these things, that you have to be willing to take the good, bad, and the ugly of what the reality is of what they think.
And it's so cool because it's like customer feedback, but within your own organization and with your own team members. So it's the same
Yeah,
philosophy a lot of people use in the research or the marketing standpoint, but it goes back to that personal growth standpoint. And so that's some stuff about personal growth, which can in turn lead to organizational growth or growth for your company or for your brand. So let's get to your bestseller growth IQ. And my first question here is, out of all the experiences and all the sort of themes that you've come across in your career, what is it that drew you to this world of growth and made you decide to focus on growth for your book, which obviously is an incredibly influential and impactful book?
it was a journey for me. I first of all, I never aspired to write a book. What had happened was I do anywhere between, let's go, if I go back sort of 14 years now when I started really speaking and keynoting, I used to do 10 or 15 or 20 a year. And last year I did 100 keynotes in a year. So, I'm
That's it.
doing, yeah, right. I'm doing one or two almost every week. Some weeks I won't do it and then I'll do 3 in a week. And I would tell you that during my time as a research fellow at Gartner, which was a decade, we would take lots of calls and I would speak a lot. And people would be like, look, you got a lot of really great stuff. Why don't you write a book? And once again, I was like, well, okay, well, I'm not really a writer. And although as an analyst, I had to write research notes, it was really
Right.
difficult for me because I'm a talker, not a writer. And so I just sort of pushed that aside. And then when I left Gartner and I started speaking even more and more, it's like, everyone on stage had a book and I didn't have a book. People were like, really, you should really have a book. I'm like, okay, like I gotta figure this out. Okay.
Hint, hint.
So then I had to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to write about? And pretty consistently over my advising days, it was always like, look, it's getting harder to sell. It's getting harder to grow. We need to fix it in quarter. Like, what do you advise us to do? Because my area of coverage was sales transformation, business model transformation, could be indirect sales, direct sales, digital marketing, right? It was all about that go to market and growth engine, if you will. And I knew I didn't want to write a sales book specifically because people would be like, oh, it's a sales book, put it on the bottom shelf over there in the corner. Because fascinating and interestingly enough, when I decided to write a book, I read like 75 of the top business books. And I as a joke, I started highlighting how many times they use the word sales in the book.
Mm.
And it was fascinating that all this amazing stuff would happen and then just stuff would just sell itself. Like,
Right.
this is all you need to do to become great, or go after that blue ocean strategy, or, cross the chasm, or, fix this innovator's dilemma, or whatever. And, that was Jeffrey Moore and Clayton Christensen. And like, I just rattled off some good ones. Right. And I tell you that, businesses at its most simple form, like, do two things. They make stuff, they sell stuff. Pretty basic. And if you don't make your own stuff, you buy it from someone and then you sell it. Right. But at the end of the day, you get stuff, sell stuff, or you make stuff, sell stuff. That's what you do. And the stuff could be people, could be widgets, could be, cars. It doesn't matter. And so at the end of the day, the only reason why you're there from a selling perspective is to grow the business. And now the question becomes, well, do you want to grow hyperscale, like double your business every year for the next 10 years? Do you just want to grow to have a comfortable lifestyle and you don't want to have more than 5 employees? You know what I mean? Like, so the first question for me was, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to grow? And how much do you want to grow? And so it was really this, what did I think was missing after reading the 75 books? And it was really a framework by which to plug in all these really great, quote unquote, management strategy, leadership, creating these amazing companies. How do you actually do that? And that's what I was hoping to accomplish with Growth IQ, was to, I don't care which philosophy you follow, blue ocean strategy, innovator's dilemma, crossing the chasm, good to great, dealing with Darwin, like, pick, that you then have to say, okay, I agree with that one. Now, what do I do next? And so Growth IQ was a way for me to be able to make it applicable to whichever strategy somebody wanted to go for.
I see. That's you've clearly put in your research there. I do have to ask before we get into the more like meaty questions. How long did it take you to read 75 books? Because that's I don't think I've gotten there total.
Yeah, and I didn't just like sit down and start reading. Some of them I had read multiple times over the course of my career. Like, the first business book I ever read was In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters.
Oh
So
yeah.
I have a massive Tom Peters crush. I love the guy. And he gave me a quote for my book. So talk about a full circle moment. First
Yeah.
book I read, Tom Peters gives me a blurb for my book. Like, that's awesome, right? Like, at
That
16
is
got
awesome.
it. At 50 I got the quote. Like, it's crazy. It's awesome. So
Happened overnight.
happened overnight. And so, some of them I had read multiple times, Good to Great, Crossing the Chasm, Innovator's Dilemma. And so it's not that I read them cover to cover, sort of went back, and I very quickly, and there was a couple of things I was doing. One, what did I feel was missing in the book? What did I like about the book? What didn't I like about the book? So I tried as best I could to write the book I would want to read and make it something that was more appropriate for someone like me, who is a visual listen learner, not a read learner. And I learn by story, not by 200 pages of data and facts.
Right.
So
Yeah.
hence why and I'm undiagnosed ADHD. So it had to be very short stories so it could keep my attention. So very selfishly, I wrote the book I would want to read. But interestingly enough, people have really noticed the effort that they either think I subconsciously or consciously did to make it a book which they could jump from chapter to chapter, and they could go back and reflect and reread something and not feel like they completely were lost. And that
Right.
was the intention. Yeah.
Right. Which is definitely a good thing to have with your book. So in the book, you mentioned how you're such a visual learner yourself, and you like to. There's so many complicated things that you deal with, but I think you do an amazing job of keeping them as simple and intuitive as possible. And so, as part of that, you've laid out 10 paths for growth, for growing your business or your brand
Hmm.
there. And so, we don't need to get into all of them right now, but I do want to highlight some of them. So, of these 10 paths of growth, what is your favorite? And part B of that would be, what do you see most commonly?
So I would tell you that the 10 paths, while we're not going to get into all of them, obviously, as you said, there should be nothing new in any of those 10. If you've been in business for any point of time, if you've gone to business school, if you've studied anything or read any other business book, you're going to read my book and go, nothing new in the 10 paths. And just an FYI, that was completely intentional. My whole goal was to take the proven growth levers, let's say, or paths that people have used to grow from some of the best management thinkers. The very first one I did was the Ansoff matrix. Was what I took was, which was a 4 quadrant, like sell more to existing customers, your existing products, sell new products to existing customers, find new customers for your existing products, new customers for your new products, like those 4, which basically maps to 4 of my paths. Once again, no surprise.
Hmm.
But what I did was I modernized those business books, the 75 or so I read, I modernized them with the fourth industrial revolution of cloud, social, mobile, big data, AI, VR, AR, machine learning, natural language processing. You know what I'm saying? Like all those big strategies were written during a time where when someone wanted to launch a product, they had to stand up a manufacturing plant and an R&D, they had to go for patents, they had to own everything from soup to nuts in order to launch that product. And that is no longer the case. So how do you approach business with those strategies with the lens on it today that you don't need to do those same things, hence proven out by I don't want to be Uberized or I don't want to be Amazonized. Like how do I Uber my business or how do I Amazon my business? That is that crossing of the, the industrial revolution way of building and growing a business, which is most of those other business books, to now saying, well, hold on, the fourth industrial revolution of a very connected and, mobile world. It's a very different environment. So that was the thought. So the question of which one is my favorite, I would say that, I did it on purpose, starting with the customer, which is the first path, and then ending with kind of purpose over profit. Like it should be bigger and more than just making money. Like we want to make sure that our employees and our families and our communities are better off having us there than not having us there. That bookend was also intentional. So I don't know if I could pick one, but I think the philosophy behind it was really what was exciting to me.
Yeah, we'll give you credit for 2. We'll give you credit for 10 as well. But yeah, the intent I think works well. What about the other part of that? So I guess at the time of this recording, is there one of these paths that you see being used most commonly with these companies that are experiencing crazy or wild growth right now?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, so the 9 paths that I picked, are once again not going to be a shock to anyone. The 10th path for me, I had as unconventional strategies. And I was looking for the next freemium, quote unquote, the sort of the freemium play that
Mm,
did very well in the early days of SaaS companies and cloud companies of, give it away for free for a certain amount of time, give away so much storage, give away, music, streaming music with advertising. And then if you want better service or better quality or no advertising or more space, then you have to pay. That sort of upsell. So give free and then upsell was the freemium model. And in my head, I was like, okay, what's the next freemium? What's freemium, in asterisks, freemium 2025? Like, what do I think is going to happen next and be the next freemium model? And I like really racked my brain about what I thought it was going to be. And then I moved from Gartner to Salesforce and really got even more embedded into the core values of the company. And our CEO is just maniacal about sort of purpose over profit, and that the purpose of business is the platform for change. And I said, you know what? The 10th path, unconventional strategies, is going to be purpose over profit. And so it's really been fantastic to watch. And you could almost say, and it was not intentional, and obviously I had nothing to do with it, but where my book ends in the 10th path, it's a perfect starting place for Mark Benioff's book Trailblazer, which is all about purpose over profit.
Wait, you guys didn't
So
plan that?
no, we did not. But so it was as you see more and more businesses, especially after the World Economic Forums, Davos, and everyone talking about this, it isn't just about the almighty dollar, that it shouldn't be about the shareholders, it should be about the broader community that we serve, and the environment and sustainability and equality and diversity and all those things that are being talked about. I feel like that 10th path of unconventional strategies was the right timing for me to call that out as something people should be looking to uncover untapped growth when, especially in the millennial generation, they are looking for brands where they agree with their values, so that, and that's who they align with. And so if you're not sharing your values and talking about your values, you're not going to attract the right talent, going back to the people side of the importance of growth. And you're not going to be able to attract the right customers, i.e. the top line selling side of growth. So I think that one right now for me is, I just continue to be excited by watching brands really lean into what that means for them as a company.
And by the way, as a millennial, I have to say Freemium 2025 sounds like one of those 90s alt rock bands. So I
Yes.
think you uncovered something there as well.
But I didn't want it to be, it wasn't freemium, right? I didn't know what the next freemium was going to
Yeah.
be, right? And not that it had a name, I didn't know. It's sort of a question mark. I just put the 10th chapter, really literally the path, it had a question mark for a long time. Like I was looking for that sign. And then it was something that was more purposeful from a human standpoint than just a pure business standpoint. And when that sort of light bulb went off in my head, I was so excited about having it begin with the customer, as I said, right, and end with like, let's just be better humans.
Yeah, everything. It's a really natural, organic way to discover that. So, I mean, you might want to release an alternate book where it just ends with a question mark, though, because that would really get people going.
Well, the other thing I would end with a question mark. And the other one is that my publisher told me that the average number of pages that someone will read of a book, if you can get them past like page 40, they will most likely finish the book. If you can't get them past page 40, they probably will not finish the book. So I will write a 39-page book with a question mark on page 40. How about that?
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah. And I just learned, I never knew that page 40 was so important. Now I'm going to like jump to page 40 whenever I read the next book.
Well, if you get to 40, you're invested. Right. But if it starts to get repetitive, or you're kind of bored, or you forgot what you read on page 10, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and if you think about the sample that you'll get on Kindle from Amazon, like, let me download a sample, it's about that size. So you're going to say, I've read that sample size, which there's a science behind the sample size.
Yeah.
And if you go, yep, I really like it, you end up buying the book.
Wow. There's this whole reading science here. So that I think that's for a whole nother conversation. But one more thing on Growth IQ. So you have so many amazing case studies. I think you have 30 case studies in the book. Which of these, I'm going to hold you to one again, just to make things make things difficult.
Yep.
But if you had to pick one of these case studies that you think readers and business owners would be most surprised to learn about, what would that be?
Well, when I wrote the book, the number one case study, so of the 30, as you just mentioned, crossed the gamut from retailers to manufacturers to, beauty companies to airlines to, right. I tried to be, agnostic with just having an opinion about lots of different industries. So people didn't think it was too one industry specific.
Right.
But when I published the book, so it published in August of 2018, Kylie Jenner was the number one question I got. Since the book has published, right? She's been on the cover. She was the first self-made billionaire. She now has sold 51% of her business for $650 million. Like, right? It's still my favorite, except now lots of people know the story where they didn't know the story when I wrote it in the book as much as they do now. And so I still lean on that one because, as I was sort of alluding to with the Industrial Revolution business that was grown up with, other beauty brands, it took them some 20, 25 years to reach their first billion. It took her less than 3. She had, she reached 600 million with 12 employees. And so you go, okay, what can I learn from that? Regardless of what you think of the family, like, I don't care. What I care about is, and the fact that you probably don't have 200 million social media followers, also don't care. but what can you learn from what she's been able to do? That's what I cared about. That you don't have to build your own manufacturing plant in your R&D lab. You can outsource that. You can outsource call center, and you can partner for, development and design. But if you are the creative, and going back to strengths and non-strengths, her strengths are, I know my generation, and she's very focused. I want them to grow up with me as I find my way through beauty and beauty secrets, like take them on this journey with me. Like I'm not her target. I'm not her target audience. I'm not her target customer. And that's okay, because she knows just who she's going after. So I think she's been masterful at it. And so I still like that story, because I think there's so many lessons that people dismiss because of who she is. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, and I find this fascinating because so many people, I don't know why I said fascinating with an accent, but I find this fascinating because so many people, the first thing they think is, the family or the background and how many followers she has, because it's insane. But if you look at what she's been able to do and think of it, okay, what lessons can I take if I'm someone with 100 followers or 1,000 followers?
Yes.
There's things that translate no matter your level of, quote unquote social media clout. So that's so cool that you dove into that, and you dove into it before it was a bigger story than it already is. And now obviously you can't go like 2 seconds without seeing Kylie somewhere now these days. So it's something else.
Yeah, and I think that was also the power behind each of the stories. So of the 30 stories in each path that I talked about from a growth perspective, there's two positive use cases of a company that used that growth path in a very specific point in time. Going back to my comment about what did I like and not like about books, is that some of the books, once they're written, like, if you look back, although it was a fantastic book, the companies they covered are like no longer relevant. They're gone.
Right.
And so I didn't want to pick a company. I wanted to pick a company in a very specific point in time, which means that that never goes away. Like you can't erase that was what happened. You can't just
Right.
say this is a great company and then 10 years later it's gone. Like in this, I'm saying this was a great decision that they made at this particular point in time for these reasons. So there's two positive use cases, and then one cautionary tale of where someone went astray on that particular growth path in a very specific point in time, and what we can learn from that mistake. So two positive, one negative across 9 of the paths. And then the 10th path, the sort of, the feel good chapter of purpose over profit, there's 3 positive use cases, no negative one.
So it's really evergreen by being historically true.
Correct. And the framework never goes out either, which also lends itself to the other business books, is one of the things I like. Like the framework doesn't ever go out of its effectiveness. The stories are the ones that fall by the wayside, right? Because the story is no longer relevant, but because they may have picked a business over the course of the business's life. And I knew that that's not what I wanted to do, because once again, going back to short burst stories, 2,500 words, sort of 4 pages, people can digest it and move on and learn something about an industry. But, there's a mix of, you go from John Deere to Kylie Jenner to Shake Shack to Red Bull to Sears to Best Buy, right? It's
Yeah.
both the audience and the reader, male and female and age range, I tried to hit, and region. So I picked companies that were global as well. So there was a lot of thought behind that.
And I was thinking you just pulled random names out of a hat.
I
This
did.
is pretty,
Yes.
very impressive. Imagine you started your own podcast. You're growing your brand, sharing your expertise, maybe even your terrible puns, and meeting fascinating people. That is awesome. Now, imagine all the hours you've lost every week due to the podcast's demands. Not so awesome. I am your podcast producer. Email me at max@hippodirect.com. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a segment on inspiration and creativity. So you are masterfully inspirational and creative, and at Salesforce, I mean, Salesforce is one of the most, creative and inspiring and growing companies out there. So to start us off here, what do you do to stay creative?
Well, I am blessed, and I know that I am, in the sense that Salesforce created this role for me. So I get to sort of navigate on a daily basis where I think I'm going to have the most impact for our customers. And so that creativity is really driven by what is top of mind for our customers, and it's different globally and it's different by size. Like, the SMB team, pulls me in very different conversations than our enterprise team, than our public
Right.
sector team, than our healthcare team, right? And so because I get that very unique perspective across size, region, and industry, I'm learning every single day as I start to hear, one, what the challenges, and two, what the opportunities are, but more importantly, sort of this entire mindset of the art of the possible in how companies are really trying to step up their game. And it means every day I have to step up mine, right? Because if I show up without, adding value, they've wasted their time, and that's not a good look. So I
Right.
think that the customers inspire me every day to continue to be creative, think differently, and by the way, I can test it so quickly and frequently that, today I'm really asking this one question, and I'll do it for a week or two, and I will have been multiple regions, multiple customer sizes, multiple industries over a couple of weeks. And I sort of have a much better feel on that question. And I might pivot it a little bit. And then the answer I thought it was going to be also shapes itself. And then I can start to share it more broadly. And then if it really starts to land, then I start writing about it. Right. And so it's a way for me to, constantly stay curious and creative.
What have you noticed since you first joined Salesforce that kind of stuck out to you as kind of like, wow, okay, I get it. Like this is why the team here has had so much success and has been able to put together so much amazing growth. What stands out to you?
I would say that hands down, like our culture is just so unique. Going back to that comment I made, that personal growth, that as an entrepreneur, when Mark and Parker started the company almost 21 years ago now, and you think about when it was, a handful of people, and you want to give away 1% of your time and 1% of your software and 1% of your equity, that's not very much. But now scale that to 40,000 people. We are giving millions of hours of volunteer time every year, millions of dollars worth of software for not for profits, and millions of dollars worth of equity. And but going back to, how do you scale that, right? From 5 people to 500 to 5,000 to 10 to 20 to 40,000 with these acquisitions we've been making. Like, how do you immerse everybody in the culture? And I'd like to think that if you walked up to anybody at Salesforce, no matter where they are in the world, and you say, what are the four, key attributes of Salesforce as a culture, everyone would rattle it off. So we spend quite a bit of time. Like right now, we're going through, everyone has to get certified on the corporate narrative. Like, you have to be able to talk about like who we are, what we do, what we stand for, so that
Right.
everyone can say it. And you have to be committed to, that investment in your people. And I just think that our leadership team is one that other Fortune 500 and global companies aspire to be, where you work for a place that is one of the best places to work globally, if not number one, number two, or number three globally, like anywhere in the world. Second, it's one of the most innovative companies in the world. And third, it's the fastest growing enterprise software company in the world. And that's not a coincidence that those three things all happen, right? You have happy employees, you have happy customers, you have happy employees and happy customers, you grow. Right?
I think there's something to this happiness that you stumbled upon there. There seems to be some sort of a tie there when you're thinking positive and optimistic there.
Yeah, so I would say that I was an outsider, like looking into Salesforce and thinking what I thought it was like, if you will. And when I got here, it was far more than what I expected.
Wow.
So I've been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And then outside of work, so what are the things that you like to do in your free time as far as hobbies or getting outside, whatever you like to do to kind of give your mind a little break?
Well, anything outdoors, obviously, and if I'm home, it's something outdoors and in the water, in the ocean.
Right.
But I'm fairly active, always have been. So if it's hiking or golfing or playing some sport, I'm usually in. And then I also, because I travel so much, I also just really enjoy being home and spending time with family and friends, because I'm gone so much of the time. But I think that I like things that are sort of recharging, and I guess sort of get my creative juices going. And that happens when everything else around me is a little more quiet, that I'm not getting hit from, all sides, from email, from text messages, from social media.
Right.
And, I'm just sort of enjoying. But, I have anything sort of outdoors and athletic and, sort of mentally stimulating is what I look for when I'm not working.
It's a good way to be. It's definitely the whether you call it unplugging or whether just call it mixing it up, it definitely makes a difference there. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. So this is where we talk about recent brand or campaign or approach that caught our attention. And earlier we were discussing this growing trend of really like the hidden brand and this advertising approach where the brand isn't up front and center. It's kind of hidden or may not be visible at all. Can you speak a little bit about why you think that works and what's some examples of what stood out to you?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that fifth path of unconventional strategy. What has been fantastic to see is how brands that are normally pushing the product sort of front and center, like that is the shiny thing. Ooh, this is why you should come and spend time with us and spend money with us, is now, I wouldn't say taking a back seat on everything, but sometimes is riding shotgun, right? So,
Yeah.
is not driving, but is definitely in the front seat, just kind of riding shotgun. And I was recently in Canada and I was speaking at an event and I was listening to this commercial. I wasn't looking at the television, and they were talking about sustainable farming and how they're really trying to push farm to table and how can they be better stewards of the planet and the environment, and really working with local cattle ranchers and farmers to make sure that they have everything they need and that we are having ethical treatment of and humane treatment of animals and all this. And so of course it piqued my interest because I was like, well, it's television commercial during prime time, so I sort of like peeked my head around the corner and all I saw in the bottom right was the golden arches. I was like, wow,
Ah,
that's a McDonald's commercial, not talking about Big Macs and supersizing fries and breakfast 24/7 and sort of pushing the product. It was a very different message, and you can see that getting more and more frequent from brands that will, it's a mix of both. It's not, you no longer see McDonald's commercials that we've all grown up seeing. It's now you're going to see both. And I think that is a testament to the fact that, going back to my comment earlier about millennials, is as we have discretionary money and money being spent across, we have 5 generations working. It's the first time that's ever happened. And we're kind of 5.5 at this point. That means you have 5.5 generations at least spending. You cannot only advertise to the price, speed, value component of the McDonald's message. You have to also hit the fact that, well, if you're 22 years old and you were going to pick between In-N-Out Burger and McDonald's across the street from each other, which one are you going to pick? And you might go, well, I like that one better. But you might say, you know what? I like the values of that. I saw this commercial the other day and I really like what they're doing with animals and farming, and they're really caring about the ranchers and the environment. Like, I'm going to go to McDonald's. Like, check the box. That helped somebody make a decision between one brand or another, and it wasn't just which one's cheaper.
right. Yeah, there's so many elements of it. Yeah, and I think it's so cool. I mean, there's a lot of brands, there's a growing number of brands that we're seeing that are doing that. But there's a real opportunity these days, especially, whether you're doing TV advertising or whether you're promoting via, digital, whatever content you're doing, there's no need to be super like up in your face about your brand. Like the brand should always be sort of, the viewer or the listener should know it's your brand, but it doesn't need to be, sell, 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 in the traditional sense.
Correct. And I think that that's a big message. And that goes back to, that growth is getting harder and businesses have to think about, how can I stand out in a really authentic way with my customers today and my customers in the future. And it cannot just be about, it's all about the almighty dollar and the bottom line and profits. And I'm going to treat my employees terribly because it's, just, I'm going to cut. And I don't care if they're happy, because I think people are realizing that if your employees aren't happy, your customers won't be either.
Yeah, it's contagious. Happiness is contagious. So only a little bit of time left here. I'd love to wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
I am ready.
All right. That's just what SpongeBob says. You hit the nail on the head there. All right. Let's get wild. Out of all the places you've traveled, and I'm not going to let you say Hawaii because it's your home, as you admitted. Uh, what is your favorite place you've ever been to?
So I answer this if I had to live, like, somewhere not in Hawaii, as you said, that's kind of a given, right? So
Yeah,
we'll
that's
put we'll
yep.
put that as the given, right?
That's a constraint.
Yep, that's the constraint. And outside the United States. Because the problem in the US is like, where would I go? Like the weather in Hawaii is almost unbeatable. So Southern California
Right.
is about as close as I'm going to get, right? Okay. So outside, I have to say, love Australia, love Sydney.
Hmm.
Weather's very similar to Hawaii. People are very nice. I'd say Australia is probably way up there from a live perspective.
Yeah.
From a visit perspective, that's different, right? Like if I'm sitting on the beach in Tahiti, I'm equally happy. But that's always hard because I've been so many places that I like things about them. But if
Yeah.
I had to live somewhere else, I'd say Australia.
I would have to imagine your passport is pretty well decorated by this point.
It is. It's pretty well decorated. Pretty well decorated.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, I would say when people don't follow through. I think that's probably one of my toughest. It's like I have super impatient. And so the follow through is like, look, if you say, hey, you're going to get to it, and it doesn't need to be like you told me Friday at noon and I got it Friday at noon. But like if you told me Friday at noon and like 4 weeks later, I'm like, hey, just checking in. Oh, yeah, sorry. It's like, look, we can all make more money, but we can't make more time. And so I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste, I don't want you to waste my time, but you know what I'm saying? So from a business perspective, I think that sort of miscommitments to me are always a tough one to overcome because it says something either that they didn't care enough about doing it for me or for themselves. But, then what other things are they not going to follow through on?
Right. Yeah. I like that word miscommitment. That's a good way to portray it. How about weird talents? Is there something that you're really good at that has no impact on your business whatsoever? It just, you're really like, it could be a memory trick. It could be a hobby.
Hmm. Yeah, so, no juggling, no singing, no like, knife throwing.
Oh, that was my next guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm not that interesting, that I don't have some weird little. Yeah, I don't think
I
so.
have to disagree on the not that interesting part, but maybe it's just record for most decorated passport because, or
Could be.
the fastest person to ever read 75 books.
Yeah, but remember that was over a lifetime, I
Yeah, I
just
know.
had to re-review them. So I'd say I have one thing that whenever I tell people this, and now all your listeners will know it as well, but I started maybe 16 years ago keeping all of the hotel room keys for everywhere I've stayed.
Really?
Yeah. And so, I actually have keys. That's how old I am, and then they've moved to car. And now that it's like
No,
keyless
no, no.
entry, it really screws me up because I'm like, oh, like I don't have a key.
You just got to
So
take the whole door with you.
I have to take out the whole thing. And so I take the key, I punch a hole in it, and on the back of it, I'll put like, wherever I was and the date. And so I have O-rings, O-rings, and O-rings, and O-rings all hanging in my home office of hundreds, thousands of hotel room keys.
That's a
And,
cool collection.
that is sort of my career. Like that's the easiest way for me to show like my career, right? Is just like all these amazing places I've been. And so what I'd love to do is to lay them all out and create, with the colors, make a map of the world out of my keys and
Ooh.
frame it. And that will be my, retirement. That's where I've been.
Yeah,
So
I like it. Yeah, well deserved. That's a lot of effort you put into that. So, thank you so much, Tiffani. This has been really, really cool hearing your philosophy and thoughts on growth, as well as the amazing things you're up to in your career and a thing or two you've collected. Where is the best place for people to connect with you, to find your book, and also to check out your What's Next podcast, which is awesome?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social. So it's at Tiffani_Bova, and it's Tiffani with an I at the end _Bova for Twitter. And I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm really active on LinkedIn as well. And then the podcast, What's Next, is on iTunes and SoundCloud and Spotify. So you can check it out in whichever you'd like. And then, of course, the book Growth IQ is been translated into 6 or 7 languages now, and also available online in Kindle and also Audible.
Perfect. And I highly endorse the English version for anybody that knows English. And last thing here, final thought, stage is yours. It could be a line, a quote. Send us off here.
Trust the process.
Consider the process trusted. Thank you, Tiffani, for coming on the show and sharing all of your tips and hotel room keys. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also dive into our marketing and business growth. I wish I could do the rolling R. Growth resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And last, but if there's one thing it's not least, come say hey, what's up, aloha, all the above on your favorite social media platforms at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!